This was one of my most anticipated games of 2026, and I'm really sad to say this, but Romeo is a Dead Man was really disappointing. Welcome to Bite Size Bunny, my name's Tony, and today we are going to be talking about Romeo is a Dead Man. Romeo is a Dead Man is the latest wacky adventure from Suda51. In this game, you play as Romeo Stargazer, a space cop running around taking out various bad guys while trying to uncover the mystery of what happened to your missing girlfriend. At least that's a really watered down description of this game. This is a Suda51 game after all, so there's definitely a lot more going on than just that, especially since it's playing around with space-time and timeline hopping and all that sci-fi BS. Playing through Lollipop Chainsaw a couple years back and then jumping into this was such a jarring experience for a multitude of reasons. While Romeo is a Dead Man opens up with all of the fun insanity that you would expect from a Suda51 game, it quickly devolves into being an over-convoluted mess that's really hard to follow, and it's just not that fun of an experience or all that engaging. None of the characters quite clicked with me at any point during this game, and none of the humor really landed for me either. As far as the sci-fi adventure side of things go, it left me wanting more. It gets repetitive really quickly, and it doesn't really have anything that makes this experience feel all that memorable. It looks pretty good, and it's got a really solid soundtrack, but I couldn't help but find myself feeling like this game lacks a soul. It feels very aimless, and it feels very slapped together, which really comes through in the gameplay, and that's what really shocked me here. While the story never quite grabbed my attention, I still found myself holding out hope that maybe it would deliver on the gameplay side of things, and that the combat and levels would really carry this experience. But it is such a slog to get through. The combat's fine. You've got an arsenal of weapons you get to unlock really quick in the first few chapters of the game, and they get the job done. There's nothing that really feels all that exciting to use, and I never felt like I needed to use any particular weapons to gain the advantage in any given combat scenarios. I played around with each of the weapons for a little while before deciding I was going to put all of my upgrade points into the katana, which also so happens to be the starter weapon in this game, and it feels like the weapon kind of is perfectly balanced for just about every given combat scenario, so I didn't feel like I was obligated to switch to anything at any given moment. But when it comes to how the combat actually feels, it feels on par with what you would expect from a middling Xbox 360 game. It doesn't feel as polished as I would have expected, and a lot of the time it feels like you can kind of just aimlessly swing at things, and that'll be enough to get the job done. I also ran into a plethora of technical issues and found that this game loves to have its frame rate drop anytime you have a lot of enemies on screen, especially when you get to the last chapter and the game lazily throws all of the enemy types at you, because it is one of those games where there's an artificial difficulty spike in the last chapter and it decides to just throw everything in the kitchen sink at you and just kind of pad out the runtime that way. The boss fights are the best thing about this game, and at least you have that to look forward to at the end of each chapter. Just unfortunately, everything else pales in comparison and doesn't even come close to being as creative or challenging as the boss fights are in this game. And this has some of the most frustrating level design I've experienced in a while. For a linear game that is only 8 chapters long, and it has you doing a lot of the same things in each one of the chapters, becoming very repetitive very quickly, I was kind of baffled by just how irritating the level design is in Romeo is a Dead Man. Throughout the game, you are slipping between dimensions to solve puzzles and navigate through the various locations you are visiting. It's very similar to Alan Wake 2, where Alan Wake can write in his journal to bounce between dimensions and gain access to walled off areas. In Romeo is a Dead Man, you are entering various TVs that are located across the map to gain access to these alternate dimensions and to complete these puzzles and gain access to these walled off areas. But what makes this mechanic so irritating in this game is every time you interact with one of these TVs, you are hit with a loading screen, and it just slows the momentum of this game down to a halt, making the entire experience just feel tedious. But even outside of the whole dimension hopping mess that this game crams into every single one of the chapters, the maps just feel clunky to navigate in general. There is nothing that feels natural about navigating your way through any of these levels, and the crappy maps that you have access to in your menus don't feel all that helpful either. I genuinely hated how the chapters were structured in this game. It feels like at one point this was maybe a 4 or 5 hour straightforward basic hack and slash game, and then they realized that's not long enough to justify a $60 price tag, so they crammed in a bunch of over convoluted levels to pad out the runtime artificially. And it just really put a damper on the entire gameplay experience for me. Overall, I really wanted to love Romeo as a Dead Man, but it just wasn't for me. This is definitely a game that's not meant for everyone, and I can see how some people would maybe even love this game. I just personally didn't. I'm going to be giving Romeo as a Dead Man a 4.5 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube stuff. And what is your favorite Suda 51 game? I'd love to know.